Okay, so as you can see here, I filled out as many needs as I could, and I was actually able to get one for each problem. Sometimes you might not be able to determine what the needs are, but that's okay. Just get as much as you can get done. And some are more descriptive than others. Again, you just want to know what that need is. That need is very important because that's the bridge between the problem that you know and the solution that you're going to create. So your next step is to actually create a brand new column called solutions. And this is the thing that you are going to decide, if you were to move forward with it, to build to help solve that problem. So I actually did this already, and I'm going to unhide this and show you the solutions. Not all of them have solutions because I wasn't able to come up with a solution for some of them. For instance, for this first one, the problem being getting rid of distractions, the need being less distractions, I couldn't really come up with a good solution that would make sense in my head right now. So I just skipped over that. It's okay to do that. Some of them were actually quite quick for me to come up with. For example, waking up properly. That's a problem that a lot of people have. And the need is, well, maybe a morning routine or getting enough sleep. What they need is information. This is a solution, information or an accountability partner. And another column that we can create here actually just to help us out, to help us define what these are even more, let's make it type. So type being, like I said earlier, service-based or product-based or more information. There will be overlap. Some of them will be 2 of the 3 categories. For this one in particular, laziness and procrastination being the problem, the solution would likely be an accountability partner or information about that. So the type would be either service-based with an accountability partner or product-based if it's more like an information product of some kind. Let's see, this one, prioritization being a problem. Learning what's important and impactful, that's what is necessary. And then the solution would be an online training program for learning how to prioritize. So this would be more of a product. And you know, it's funny, actually going through this, I noticed that there were many solutions that were similar to each other. For example, that prioritization one, there's one here which is overwhelmed with projects being a problem. The need would be a vision and less total projects. And so a training program on prioritization. So that's a product as well. So we'll mark that as such. But what I'm going to do is color code this so that we can understand that those are very similar to each other. So those 2 are orange. And that just tells me, that there's this big problem and there's this potential solution that's very similar to helping people with those kinds of similar problems. There was another one here that matched pretty well. This problem, not being able to find a good calendar to use, well, the need is to learn what they need in a calendar and how to use it. So training on how to use a good calendar properly or different apps or some sort of product. So that would likely be a product too. I don't know why that's bold. And then the one right below that, interestingly enough, long-term planning is non-existent. That's a problem. So they need to understand more about what their goals are and where they want to go and when. And the solution I came up with was like a 12-month calendar. A lot of people have the 1-month calendars or the calendar apps. Well, what about a 12-month wall calendar? I actually use one of those myself, although there could be some improvements on it, which is potentially a good sign. It's best if you're coming up with problems and solutions that you could use yourself, because then you're more invested in it. But that doesn't always have to be the case. I've created businesses and products based on stuff that I've never done before or have no interest in, but I do have a passion for helping those people. So this one would be a product as well, more of like a physical product, which is really interesting. I have never done that before. And then I noticed that there were 2, actually let me color code these 2 here because those 2 are similar. Let's do yellow. And then there was a couple about sleep, which was interesting. This one we talked about earlier, so I'm going to color code this one red. And there was one down here about the problem not getting enough sleep. Again, we're talking about productivity here. And the need being, well, they need more sleep or more time or just better sleep. So I had come up with the idea of, maybe a sleep coach, which would be really interesting. So that would be more of a service. So the final step here, as you're going through this, and you're more than welcome to pause this video anytime you want so that you can do this along with me, or you can do all these things afterwards. But I hope you can see that we're sort of taking iterations here. We're doing one step and it's moving on to the next. We are now coming up with solutions, and now you have a bank of solutions that you can choose from. You know what kind of type it is, and you can see which ones align with who you want to be and what you want to do. For me, for instance, I don't want to be a coach or or an accountability partner in the sense that I want to work with people one-on-one. I'd rather build something that helps more people at one time. So I can do something, for instance, like this. I can go into my spreadsheet and click the strike through key here to just remove those. And that just basically tells me that, this isn't something that I really want to do. So that helps narrow these things down if you need help. For some of you, one of them will stand out like daylight to you and just be the one that you know that you're going to move forward with. Now, before you move forward, whether you go through a little bit more time to narrow down your selection to one or you already know what that one is, what I really want to focus on here is who is this for? Understanding who your product is for is going to be really important. And we've talked about that a little bit already, productivity, people who need help with productivity, but you need to get more focused. The more narrow you are in your niche, the easier it will be to make some noise in that space, to be an expert in that space, and to actually reach out and talk to those people who are specific to that particular need and problem. All right, so here's an example of how different kinds of businesses and different types of businesses have been able to narrow down. This is just kind of brainstorming here with you so that you can see that you can do this too, and you should do this because I'll show you why. So for instance, on my spreadsheet, there were a lot of examples and ideas for organization, right? Organizational tools, coaches for organization, things like that. You could create a product to help people stay more organized, and that's pretty general, and maybe it would be useful for some and maybe not. But what if you created a product or an organizational coach for teachers? That could be very useful. Or maybe for moms. Or what about for people who are coaching sports teams? Or better yet, coaching baseball teams, because they're going to have a different set of requirements, different sets of things to worry about. So the more narrow you are, the more likely it is that you're actually going to help people because you know and understand exactly the kind of problem they have. Other kinds of people might have that same problem, but when you narrow it down to one specific market and group, it makes it a lot easier for you to share that information and also end up with a sale at the end. Now, you could do it that way. There's a lot of different demographic kinds of ways to narrow down. You could do it based on interests, like we were just talking about, or specializations, age, gender, location. Those are all great things. Or you could do just sort of what's the market is not doing. That's a great way to go about it. And lucky for you, you've done the market map research already. You could potentially go back and do more now that you've narrowed down your idea a bit to find out, well, what else is being offered in the market and what is not. That way you can position yourself with something unique and noteworthy that would kind of stand out from the crowd. So another example would be financial planning. That's sort of a sub-niche in and of itself in the sort of big grand scheme of, managing money, right? But within financial planning itself, what if you narrowed it down to financial planning for newlyweds? Newlyweds, people who are just getting married, there's a whole different set of requirements and things that are going on that are different than people who are in their 50s and 60s, right, when it comes to financial planning. So you can narrow your focus to that. And I would choose that focus based on what your interests are, or perhaps what aligns with who you are and what you're interested in teaching. If you were doing design work, maybe you're a designer and you want to help out people who are designing on the computer. Well, that's great and somewhat narrow. You're removing the people who are doing pen and paper and actual, things like that. But maybe you can narrow it down even more for people who specifically want to create graphics for video games. Getting more narrow helps you find those people even better and be able to actually reach out to them and make an impact on them even more. Let's talk about some products now. Products are also narrow. So if you, for instance, had a yoga mat, you came up with this idea for this amazing yoga mat. What if you narrowed it down for a yoga mat just for men? So that's gender specific, but it's also kind of different than what the rest of the industry is doing. So you would then, in the following videos, when we reach out to people, you would talk specifically to those men and be able to actually get feedback from them and talk about this idea. Maybe it's not something they want, but now that you have this focus, you can then go to that group so that you're not creating something that they don't want. Again, we're taking all the guesswork out of this, and it starts with actually narrowing your focus. Maybe on the opposite realm, maybe you create camping knives for women. I don't know. Maybe you have a drawing product that's out there, and instead of just general drawing, you do anime. You're teaching people how to do anime, which is sort of the Japanese cartoons. Information, even with information, you can get very specific with who you're targeting. The best example I have is my friend Steve Cam, who has a blog and a website at nerdfitness.com. So he teaches in the health and fitness space, but it's specifically for nerds, which is really cool because he's actually been able to build a huge following, hundreds of thousands of nerds who follow him for fitness advice because they can relate to him and the language that he's using. He drops in a lot of Lego and Star Wars sort of motifs here and there, and people love it. And people who aren't into that, well, they're not on that site, and that's okay. And he's doing extremely well. Even though he's narrowing it down, he's actually building his audience much faster than he could if he was just generally speaking about fitness and health and wellness. All right, so before I get to formally sharing your action item, which you probably know what it is already, I want to let you know what I chose to do, what type is it, and who it's for. So you saw my spreadsheet there. You can actually go and download that spreadsheet to see how it's all filled out and what I actually ended up with. But what I actually ended up with was the calendars. So the calendars are something that's really interesting to me because I have a need for a better calendar system. The calendar system I use on my computer is actually called Sunrise, was bought by Microsoft and is now actually, they just are removing that app, which is terrible. And now I have to find a new one. It's also making me think of how I'm using my 12-month wall calendar, which I have one, but I hardly ever use it. I'm trying to think of like, well, why don't I use it? And who is this for? I want to create a calendar. This is again, we're talking about productivity here. I want to create a calendar that's specific about productivity, helping people and showing people, likely people who are professionals, men and women, who just really want to get stuff done and actually keep track of that. So somehow, you know, creating a calendar that helps keep track of whether or not somebody's productive. Yeah, we'll see what happens, but that's my big reveal to you. Obviously, it needs a little bit more thinking, but you're in the same boat as I am. We're starting this journey together, and you'll see how it progresses along the way. I'm gonna open up and get uncomfortable a little bit in the next video, where I actually, in the additional resources section, you'll see that I'm actually having real conversations with people about this calendar idea. And you're gonna be able to do the same thing for your idea too. It's gonna be pretty cool, but until then, your formal call to action, your action item is to do what we just did. Come up with the solutions for your particular needs, and then create the type, or understand what types those are, narrow them down, pick one, and once you have that one that you're excited about, think about it, and then move forward to the next video when you're ready. See you there.